Welcome to today's video on aspect patterns. We're going to go over some of the major aspect patterns you might see in the chart and talk about kind of what they mean, how to work with them, how to begin to delineate them or understand them. So if you do want to go further into aspects, I have a course. It is available. You can jump in now. The lives start on the 21st of September, and it's going to go through aspects in astrology, and I'm going to teach you how I read them. So if you want to get into that, click the link in the description. Today, the aspect patterns that we're going to cover are the stellium, T-square, grand trine, kite, grand cross, and yod. I want to make a note about chart patterns versus aspect patterns. A chart pattern is where the planets are. There's like a splash, and there's like a bucket where like there's one planet on one side and a bunch of planets on the other. This is a chart pattern, not an aspect pattern, because aspect patterns are like when those planets that are in different places also make aspect to each other. So you can have a chart pattern or a chart theme where like all the planets are on one side, or they're all spread out like one planet, like almost one planet in each sign. But that's not actually an aspect pattern. So I wanted to clarify there's a distinction there. But let's go ahead. We're going to start with our first one, which is a stellium. Now, this one could also be considered a chart pattern rather than an aspect pattern. But either way, it's a super common one. So that's why we're going first. I have one. Lots of people have them. And we're going to talk about what it is and what it means. So if you have a stellium, that means you have 3 or more planets in a sign or a house. You can look at sign-based or you can look at house-based. And depending on what house system you're using, if you're using whole sign, it'll be the same. If you're using Placidus, it might change because of where the house cusp lines lie. But there is some debate about this. Some people say a stellium has to be 4 planets. And I think the reason is because both Mercury and Venus, they can never be too far from the sun. So having a stellium, especially with Mercury and Venus in that sign, is super common. Mercury can only be 1 sign before, 1 sign after. Venus can only be 2 signs before and 2 signs after the sun. So the likelihood that these 3 planets are going to be in the same sign at any moment is quite high. I don't think that means it doesn't matter. And, whether we call it a stellium or we don't call it a stellium, it's a bunch of planets in the same sign. So I'm not as concerned about whether you define what your chart is as stellium or not stellium. I'm concerned about what it means and helping you figure out what it means. So I don't care about this debate. But that is why I think it is debated. It just means you have a lot of energy in that place, and it's not a bad thing. Stelliums are not inherently good or bad. You have a lot of planets in that same place. So what really happens in your life when you have a stellium is that everything kind of happens at once when that stellium is activated, either by transit or by annual perfection or by zodiacal releasing or by that's all I can think of. But basically, if you have good planets and bad planets in the same stellium, then good and bad things will happen at the same time. If you have a stellium with only Jupiter, Venus, and the sun and the moon, then it's going to be good times whenever that stellium gets activated. So it doesn't really make you a bad person. It doesn't make you an imbalanced person. If you want more on stelliums, I have videos on stellium, I think through the houses and maybe the signs too. I have several videos on stelliums from the past that you can watch. But just know that a stellium by itself in your chart doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. And a lot of people have trouble because they see all these planets and they're like, how do I interpret them all? And you just parse them out. You can just start with one planet and see how does this planet affect it, and how does the other planet affect it, and how does the other planet affect it, and just do that one at a time. When you have a stellium, some of those planets in the same sign might have a tight conjunction. Like let's say you have a stellium in Leo and you have the sun in Leo and the moon in Leo, and they're both at 2 degrees of Leo. So you would also, and let's say you have like Venus at 27 degrees of Leo or something. Well, then you have a stellium, but the sun and moon are conjunct And that means you're born on a new moon also, but that's beside the point. But it means that those planets have a conjunction, but Venus would not be a conjunction. So in order to start interpreting a stellium, I would start and look at like which planets are the closest together, and see if there are any actual conjunctions. And just start by looking at that one conjunction by itself and, try to put it into pieces. Other things about stelliums is there's a really simple hack to balancing out a stellium. If you have a stellium in a sign and you feel that you have too much of the negative qualities of that sign, then you can just try to be like the opposite sign. I'm making it sound so easy, but you can try to be like the opposite sign. And if you have a bunch of planets in one house, the idea is that the way to balance out that house is by focusing on the opposite house. So let's say you have a stellium in the 12th house. Well, the 12th house is a very, very private house where we are isolated and we want to be by ourselves and we want to do spiritual things. The way to balance that out, if that is a challenge. Now, if you're isolated and you're happy, fine, I don't care. But if your isolation is causing you problems and causing you pain and you want to fix it or you want to work with it, then one of the I'm making it sound so easy. One of the things you can do is move your energy to that 6th house. What do we do in the 6th house? We engage with life. We go to work. We solve problems. We help others. We be of service. We're actually doing shit in that 6th house. We have real things to take care of. So that takes us out of that sort of sometimes imaginary, but also very spiritual, deep psychological place, contemplative place that 12th house can, not always be a bad place, but if it's too much energy, it's too much energy. So that's kind of how you work with a stellium. You figure out what is wrong. Like if there are problems, you fix them. And if there are not problems, you don't fix them. That is my deep spiritual insight on stelliums. So let's go now to the T-square. Again, I have more videos on this if you want more. For the T-square, you can, number one, for T-squares have hard aspects. And you can accomplish a lot when you have a T-square or a grand cross or squares in your chart. So do not think that this means something bad about you. It's a dynamic tension that you kind of have to learn how to work with and harness and use to your benefit or to the best way you can. So what is a T-square? It is an opposition and one planet squaring both of the other planets in the opposition. So if you look at it on the chart, it looks like a T. So because there's an opposition, but the planet squares them both, so it's one opposition and two squares. So one square to the first planet in the opposition and one square to the other planet in the opposition. The planet in between is called the apex. Because the T-square has an opposition and square, it has both energies involved. So the opposition is like being pulled in two directions, like a tug of war or like a seesaw energy, of like having to be pulled this way and be pulled this way based on the sign and house where it's at. The other square is internal tension. So it's like, I really want to do this, but I really want to do this, and I can't do both, and an adjustment has to be made. So my example here is, let's say you have a square between Leo and Scorpio. Maybe you'd struggle with your need for privacy versus your need to be seen. Now, let's say Leo, Scorpio, let's say we have the other planet in Taurus, then you would have that T-square between Scorpio, Taurus, and Leo. Taurus, like your need or desire to take care of yourself or enjoy the senses or connect with the physical world versus that Scorpionic need to go deep into the psyche versus the Leo need to like be seen or be, pour energy into something, be generous, lead. Now, that's a really quick rundown, of course. We could even go deeper on that. But the idea here is that you're pulled in a bunch of different directions. So if you have a fourth planet in the T-square, that is not a T-square. That's actually a grand cross. So watch the part on the grand cross for that. Working with the T-square involves determining the mode. You need to know if it's cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Because there are three modes: cardinal, fixed, mutable. And because of the nature of a T-square, it will be one of those three. And if it's cardinal, that's going to be Aries, Libra, Cancer, or Capricorn, 3 of those. And the strength of this T-square is going to be initiating. The challenge of this T-square is going to be maybe when or how to initiate. If you have a cardinal T-square, it's going to be about initiating. That's the strength of this T-square. The challenge is kind of figuring out either when to initiate or what to initiate or how to initiate it. And whatever signs you have the planets in are going to be the sort of ways you argue with yourself about how to start things. And sometimes I've found people with cardinal challenges they know how to start it, but then they don't know what to do with it afterwards. So being able to step in and maintain something or delegate can be issues sometimes too. If you have a fixed T-square, your strength is consistency and sticking with things and maintaining. And this is very, very good for like stamina and like withstanding things. But the challenge for the fixed T-square is recognizing the need to change and then being willing to do it. So then for the mutable T-square, it's kind of the opposite of the fixed, where that's going to be, I didn't say these signs. For fixed, the signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. For mutable, if it's a mutable T-square, that's going to be if the planets are in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces. And the strength is you're good at changing. You're good at adjusting. You're good at adapting and like reacting to situations and like stepping in when you need to and going with the flow. Changing is a strength, but the challenge is when not to change and focus, because mutable people in general get bored. I am very mutable. I know a lot about this. I feel you if you have this problem where it's hard to maintain focus, or it's hard to not get bored with when you're doing the same thing all the time. And it's like I think of like a business owner who has a menu, like they're like, let's say someone owns a restaurant and they have a mutable T-square. Maybe they're changing the menu every week. And it's like your customers don't need you to change the menu every week because they want it to be the same, like fine, you could have a weekly special or something, but like sometimes the T-square people who are mutable, the people who have a mutable T-square will react to every problem, changes the solution to every problem. And every problem doesn't actually need you to change to solve it. Sometimes you need to recognize when to stick with it and keep pushing through. Okay, so more on how to work with a T-square. You're going to start with the planet at the apex. And you're going to find that house. And that's probably going to be where the challenge lies, is where that planet at the apex is. So I've heard to do 2 things. Like you can either work on that planet and try to make it better, try to work on matters of that house. You don't have to do this by like working on the planet directly. You can just, if your mutable T-square or whatever, not mutable, if any T-square you have is in, let's say the apex. Let's say the apex is in the 10th house. So you would have a planet in this first house, a planet in the 7th house, and a planet in the 10th house. What you need to do here is bring your energy to matters of the 4th house, which is your home, your family, your emotional foundation, and what you need, where you need to belong. So this is just an example of how to work with a T-square. You focus on that missing piece where there is no planet, because the mode is going to have 4 signs. And so your T-square is going to have a planet in 3 out of those 4. Find that 4th sign, look at what house it is in your chart, and work on those things. Okay, so T-squares have an intensity and an inner restlessness, and the thing is you have reserves of energy to draw on, but you need to learn how to direct the energy so it can work for you instead of against you. And with challenging aspects, you can rise and harness them. So do not think that this means something bad about you. A T-square is like a slingshot where you metaphorically grab that planet at the apex and pull it back and launch it toward that sign in the opposite sign and house. Okay, so now let's go to the Grand Trine. The Grand Trine is in the 3 planets in the same element that are aspect by trine. So it's 120 degrees. that means they're 5 signs away. Again, they're the same element. So if you have a planet in Aries, the one in Leo is going to be the trine. Leo and Sagittarius are going to be the trine. Just because you have a planet in Aries and a planet in Leo does not mean they're both exactly trine. This is a difference between sign-based and degree-based. But when they're exactly trine, or again, within orb, then this is, according to Robert Hand, this is called a third harmonic because it divides a circle by 3. If you want more on harmonics, I recommend his book, Horoscope Symbols. But the trine is a soft aspect, which means it represents ease. This does not mean every trine does good things. Trines can do bad things and squares can do good things. I know this is different than what you're taught, but it's true. Sometimes a trine will make it easy. If it's with a bad planet, it'll make it easy for something bad to happen. Do not think that now that you heard that bad things are going to happen to you. But even in transit, a Saturn trine might finalize something that you wanted it to keep going. So trines make it easy for those planets to connect with each other, but the connection isn't always good. So think about it if you're at a party and it's easy to talk to someone, or you're right by a total asshole. That's a trine. That's a trine to Mars. Because you don't necessarily want that to be easy, but it is. Just because you have trines doesn't always mean your life is easy. Sometimes it can mean good things come to you more easily. There is sort of a definition or an indication with trines that when that trine is activated, a good thing will fall in your lap. So if you have trines, it might be good to consider the fact that some people don't, some people don't have things just show up in their life. Think about someone who gets an inheritance, and it's okay, that person maybe had that trine activated, or someone started a business and made $50 billion on that business. Maybe they had a trine in their chart. Yeah, sure, they still did the work, but it's other people could do the same work and not make 50 billion. And so that's kind of my thought on that. All right. So one of the things now, again, a trine may not make it easy for something good to happen. It might make it easy for something bad to happen. If you have Mars or Saturn, they're Mars trine Saturn might make it easy to take disciplined action. It might make it easy to be stopped when you are doing something and have to report to some authority or something. So Uranus trine the moon probably isn't that easy. It might be a little easier than Uranus square the moon, but it's easy for your emotions to be rattled if you have Uranus trine the moon. It's easy for emotional shocks to happen if you have Uranus with the moon. This is not going to feel easy for the person who has it. So those are some examples of how easy doesn't always equal enjoyable. So if you have a grand trine, though, that does mean there is a gift here. And that is, the gift here is that you can really work with the element that those planets are in. So it's going to be water, fire, air, or earth. And you probably don't, the thing is, you don't always know you have this gift. Or you don't know that it's such a good thing, because with all of us, with our good things, we don't know that other people, it's hard for them. We don't know what that's like, and we can't really understand. For someone really, really smart, they don't know what it's like to struggle in school. For someone who is super, super strong, they have they don't get it when someone can't lift something. It's because it comes so easily. It's just work out and do it. Come on. That's a bad example because people can work out. But when someone's eloquent and has a way with words, they don't understand why someone else can't communicate. When someone is well dressed and they dress really well, they don't always get it why someone else can't do that when it comes so easily. So if your grand trine is in water, then this is emotional awareness, emotional regulation, work that involves empathy or compassion, knowing what to say to make someone feel better. And with a grand trine in water, you really can begin, maintain, and complete emotional stuff. So you might be really good at helping people almost clear their emotions in a way. For fire, it's about passion, action, intuition, instinct. Fire grand trines like to do stuff. They do not like to feel stuck. They have a driving force. They have an energy that needs to go somewhere, and they are usually physical, and they do not get knocked down easily. For air signs, for grand trine and air, this is communication. It's enjoying conversation, wanting to share ideas, seeing things from a different perspective, selling, doing sales, using your words, uplifting, inspiring, teaching, getting into technical details, maybe being a skilled speaker or writer, or the ability to express thoughts. It's really, air is communication. It's quick moving, and you probably need a lot of mental stimulation if you have a grand trine in air. If you have a grand trine in earth, this is the physical world that you have almost like mastery over, in a way, where you can be grounding, you can be calming, you can, like nature, you can work hard, you can have work ethic and stamina, you can be of service, you can sometimes try to accomplish things or care about accomplishment, and just enjoy the senses. So not just, but those are the different ways to kind of categorize the planets in a grand trine to understand what gifts they might unlock for you. All right, going on to our next one, which is the kite. So the kite is a grand trine with an opposition. So think about, you've got the triangle, right? You've got the 4 planets total. 3 of them are going to be equal distant from each other, 120 degrees in like a triangle. And then one planet is going to oppose any one of those 3. So that's what makes it a kite instead of a grand trine. The opposition helps. The opposition brings in a dynamic force that helps these easy aspects to do something. So this is actually good. If you have a grand trine with the opposition and you think, oh, I have a red aspect. No, actually it's a good thing, because without the opposition, sometimes people with grand trines have a really, really hard time doing things, doing something with it. It's like you'll get all these blessings in life, but it's harder for them to do something with it. Now, if you have squares or oppositions elsewhere in your chart, that also counts toward helping. But there is the one point in this grand trine that represents challenge. In this kite that represents challenge. So usually you're going to be good at the element of the grand trine. You can watch that part if you want more. But you want to really look at, what does the opposition oppose? What does that planet oppose? What's at the point, like at the top of the kite? What is that planet? What sign and house is it in? That's going to be a really, really important factor or part of your life. So if it's in the 9th house, maybe you write a book, maybe you travel, maybe you learn spiritual things, maybe you get some guru to teach you spiritual things. If it's in the 11th house, maybe you do something in groups. If it's in the 5th house, maybe you do something creative or have kids or have a business. If it's in the 1st house, maybe there's something about your personal image that's really hugely important. The planet that the opposition opposes provides a source of energy to get your kite to take off. So work on that planet if you have a kite and it's not taking off. So let's go on now to the next one, which is the Grand Cross. Okay, so the first thing about the Grand Cross is it does have a lot of tension. It does have a lot of dynamic energy. It does have squares and oppositions, which are hard aspects. So you remember, you can accomplish a lot when you have hard aspects in your chart. Do not think this is a bad thing. Do not feel bad if you have hard aspects. Bad aspects make good people. Not always. It depends on the planets and stuff, but bad charts usually do. A lot of celebrities or people who accomplish amazing things have pretty gnarly stuff in their charts. So 4 squares and 2 oppositions. So you get 2 oppositions, a planet in each of the 4 signs in one mode. So that's going to be cardinal, fixed, or mutable. And so if it's a cardinal Grand Cross, it'll be the cardinal signs: Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. And it's like a big plus sign in your chart. That's why it's called a Grand Cross. It looks like a cross. So what happens here is the oppositions are these seesaws between these two axes, but you have two of them. So it's like you're pulled this way, this way, this way, and this way. And you're going to dive into this and dive into that and dive into this and dive into that. It really isn't necessarily always bad. It's how your energy naturally functions. Working with the Grand Cross means figuring out what mode it's in. Is it cardinal? Is it fixed? Is it mutable? It's very similar to the T-square, but we're going to go over it again. For cardinal, that's going to be Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, and Capricorn. You'll have a planet in all 4 signs, and the strength is initiating. The strength is starting things. But when you need to start something, you might have internal tension that you argue with yourself because there's all these squares about how to start. With a fixed Grand Cross, that's Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius, and the strength is consistency. So you're going to be amazing at sticking with things, at having stamina, at carrying things out, at maintaining something. Same as the fixed T-square is figuring out when you need to change. And change will be like this stress point that hits you hard, and then bam, you power through it, kind of. Now we have the immutable Grand Cross. This is going to be if the planets are in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, and Pisces. So the strength is you're good at changing, you're good at adapting, you are good at adjusting and fitting yourself to a situation. But the challenge is recognizing when not to change, when not to adjust, when not to adapt, and when to maintain focus. Worst case scenario, someone with a mutable energy who's doesn't know how to work with it is like the kind of person at a job who's like going around doing everyone else's jobs because they don't know when to stay focused on their thing. They'll adjust so much. Or like another example, I use this in the T-square part, but it's the same energy. It's like the chef who keeps trying to change the menu to make it better when customers are already raving about the food. Like that's not what needs to be changed. That actually makes it worse because if they're raving about the food and you take something off, they're going to be pissed, you know? So mutable energy for people with strong mutable stuff, and the mutable Grand Cross is a very strong mutable thing to have. Your life lesson is about learning, seeing the limits of like, how to use that ability to change and adjust and adapt to your benefit, but also not let it pull you off course. Because what will happen is when life gets hard, what are you going to do? Quit your job. What are you going to do? Just change something you don't need to change. Break up with someone you don't need to break up with because you didn't know how, it's like that's just what your natural go-to. So remember, you can work with these things. This is very general, and there is a superpower for each one of these. Okay, going on to our last but not least aspect pattern, we are going to talk about the yod. I do have a whole video on this, especially if you're more interested in the modern idea of a yod. But a yod is 2 quincunxes in 1 sextile. It looks like a triangle in the chart. And if there is a planet in between the sextile, that's known as a boomerang, but there doesn't have to be. Just to make it a yod, it's 3 planets. And the planets, the thing that makes it a yod also is that the planets at the base of the yod must be in a sextile and they must have a 3-degree orb. Some astrology software will tell you have a yod if you don't, so watch out for that. But people, sometimes I notice too, people are like, do I have a yod? And they just see a triangle and it's like, it looks like a triangle. Maybe that's it. So I'm going to tell you how to tell if your yod is really a yod based on the signs that it's in. There will be a planet at the top of the yod. Now, if you were looking at the sign opposite of that planet, there should be one planet in the sign before that and 1 planet in the sign after that. So, and those planets must be sextile and they must be within 3 degrees of the planet at the top. So if a yod has, we're going to look at Nikki Glazer's chart for this example. Nikki Glazer has the sun at 11 degrees of Gemini. She has Jupiter at 11 degrees of Capricorn, and she has Saturn at 11 degrees of Scorpio. Mars is also in Scorpio. We're going to ignore that for the moment, just for this purpose of identifying, is this a yod? Is this not a yod? It is a yod. Why? Because the sun in Gemini is at the apex. The sign before, okay, and then so we start with the sun in Gemini. What's the sign opposite of Gemini? Directly opposite, it's Sagittarius. So is there a planet before that? Yes, that's the Capricorn planet. No, that's the Scorpio planet. And is there one after that? That's the Capricorn planet. So Jupiter and Saturn are also in a sextile that's 60 degrees. So because of that, this is a yod. So you just need to start with a planet at the top, see if the two planets that make aspect are quincunx. So that is how you know it's a yod. Now, people call the yod the finger of God, and I made a joke on my last video, like, I don't know what finger, because this modern idea is that, like, if you have a yod, you are special, you have some special fate, and I have found that a lot of my clients with yods, not all of them, but a lot of them know what they're supposed to do, and they just feel it. Like, they feel called to this thing they're supposed to do, and a lot of them do it. And I've also heard that for yods, people who have them, if they're not on course, they'll get a smack from the universe. But, I haven't researched this too deeply, so I'm not calling those things facts. But here is what I think are the facts about yods. First of all, I don't usually add that much meaning to a yod anymore. It's not really my style anymore. When I was newer, I did. And I just think it's not the best way to do astrology, to tell people everyone with this aspect are special and everyone without it are not. It just feels a little bit cheesy to me now, and it feels a little bit misleading because yods are hard, quincunxes are hard to deal with, and we're all special and no one's special. So a yod involves a bit of like hopping on one foot and hopping on the other when the two planets are involved. So it's like where you want to do something, but you feel like you can't because you have this other thing you have to do. Or when you're doing the other thing, you're thinking about the first thing. So I'm going to use Nikki's chart as an example. Now, I haven't talked to her, so I can't, back any of this up, but this is how I might look at it as an example. So you can have kind of a way to go step by step. So number one, Sun in Gemini in the second, desire to make money and using her voice. She's a comedian and she has also sang on The Masked Dancer. And I don't know if she sang on Kelly Clarkson or just talked about it, but I saw her talking in an interview about how she wanted to be singing more, like it was something she wanted to do. Jupiter in the ninth in Capricorn, there's more in her chart about why, but we're only focusing on the yod. Jupiter in the ninth in Capricorn is like expanding your beliefs in a practical way. And then Saturn in the seventh in Scorpio can be about experiencing and restricting intensity in relationships. So when she's doing work stuff, second house sun, there's this relationship in the back of her mind, or she's got studying or spiritual stuff in the back of her mind. And then when she's doing spiritual stuff, she'll get calls about work or when she's with close friends. Maybe practical beliefs with that Jupiter could have stopped her from doing comedy or singing in the past, or maybe she had to wrestle with this a little bit. And then with, Saturn and Scorpio in the seventh, trust issues and relationships could be a challenge with work-related stuff. Or she could have had to work with people she didn't trust at a certain point and deal with those challenges. So we could take this a step further and consider the house rulers. So the sun ruling the fourth house and Saturn ruling her 10th house and her midheaven, while Jupiter rules her 8th and 11th. So because of this, home, family, and emotional foundation could feel tugged on for her by her relationships. Like a relationship makes her feel unsafe, or the desire to have intense experiences in relationships, it's like almost a need, can be something that's, I don't know, maybe not what she was raised to believe, or put some kind of pressure or tension around her needs. It's almost like competing needs here. The need to feel safe, not having risk, and then the need to go risk something. Or like always having to decide between your partner and your family. Like, do I go home for Christmas or do I stay with my partner who has to work? Or, having Jupiter also rules her friends and her audience. So she could feel like she's a yo-yo from like working, having meaningful conversations with her friends and like evolved conversations and like high level conversations about beliefs, and then going back to her romantic partnerships. And so Another thing is with Jupiter and Capricorn, Capricorn planets like having a goal. So she could have felt like she really likes having a goal, but then, the sun in the second can get really engrossed in the current project. So this can feel like needing to do all the things at the same time and, having to choose between setting the goals or thinking about the next step or being in the boss energy versus being at the worker. Okay, so that's just a little bit about that. But if you have a yod, there will be a challenge to integrate the energies because there's a natural disconnect between the planets. They don't see each other. They're around the corner. They cannot connect, and it's just hard to get them to connect. But because the yod, the sextile, creates a midpoint that is opposite of the apex of the yod, that is what Robert Hand actually says. The yod contains the germ of its resolution. So the idea is that if you have a yod with two quincunxes, there is a solution sort of built into your chart naturally. You can think of it like a three-legged stool that like one of the legs just doesn't quite, isn't quite the same length, and it just like jiggles a little bit. But if you just jiggle it just right, you can make it work. That's your deeper spiritual meaning of a yod. Join my course, Unlock Your Aspects, which is a 6-week live course that teaches you the building blocks of reading aspects in the chart. If you've ever looked at your chart and been overwhelmed or wanted to dig deeper into an aspect but didn't know how, this course is for you because I'm going to teach you the building blocks of reading aspects. The live classes begin September 21st, and it is an exclusive live with me, so don't miss it. Click the link below to join. I hope to see you in there.